this is the 1916 66-3 because it has a hand crank on it. Now, I just set this up to do hand crank embroidery, and there are a couple of things that are evident and different from the 1591 with the bishop hand crank immediately. First of all, I did start this a minute ago and made a video, and I had made a mistake, so I'm starting it again. The first different thing. This is a normal 6-inch hoop, and I couldn't get it under the needle. So the needle is set a little bit lower than on the 1591. So I had to take the needle out to get the hoop in, which is fine. The second thing, when you thread the machine, and I think it's in the view here, maybe not, over here, and the fabric's in the way. This thread guide, right here, when you come around the tension, you have to go through the hole in the thread guide. And that's what I had done wrong a few minutes ago. I didn't have it coming through there. Now, I was able to do what I was doing, but it seemed like a different kind of stitch. So that's the first thing. I've got the manual online here, and it does not say change the stitch length. And I thought that would make a difference. I now have it on a longer stitch length. I had tried it on a shorter stitch length, like trying to get to 0, and the directions don't say anything at all about changing the stitch length. The feed dog cover plate you need is number 32622. And other than that, and threading through the hole in the thread guide, there isn't a lot to do with this. You put the feed dog cover plate on, you thread the machine correctly, and I'm surprised they don't have you change the stitch length. But this is a simpler machine than the 1591, so that could be part of it. Now, the first thing you'll see is the Singer hand crank is going 3 times as fast, which means I have, unless I slow down, less time to lengthen or shorten my stitch. And that's why the stitch seemed different to me, as if it was just sewing, because it's similar to the video I put up about using a motor on the Spartan. If you go fast, you have less time, and that's a little bit outside the boundaries. You have less time to move the hoop before you're all ready. So this is going to take more practice. With the 1591 and the slower bishop hand crank, I had plenty of time to move the hoop. So I still think that if you start with a hand crank, you're actually developing the skills to move the hoop. That's just my opinion. So you can see how fast my hand is going, how fast the stitch is going, but what I have to be better at with this one is moving the hoop quickly. And that's kind of a problem right now because the fabric is 16 or 18 inches long, it's bumping into things, and I didn't put the plastic wrap on the outer hoop. But this is an easy machine to use. So make sure you read the manual before you start it anyway. And right now, I'm closer to just sewing than embroidering. Part of that is because the area of the lips I'm doing is very narrow. So all I have to do is really fill in a narrow strip. With the red cross that I was doing, I had a much wider area to fill in. Now, somebody has commented this morning that they couldn't do it with a hand crank, they didn't feel, because it was too slow. So there are people out there that are so adept at this that you picture a motorized machine needle and how fast it goes, and they're moving the hoop that fast. So it's a learning experience, and I think that if you don't have the opportunity to try a couple of different machines, you at least might now be aware of why your machine is good or bad at something, or what you might have to change. So if all I had was my Singer 6212, which is a fairly fast machine, I would have to develop the skill to be able to move the hoop faster. If I decide to use the 1591 all the time, I can take my time, I can do what I want, you know, I could probably make tea in between stitches if I wanted to. This is somewhere in the middle of that. This 66.3 hand crank is somewhere in the middle. So it's like the three bears. You can decide which is more important to you. Is it a skill of moving the hoop, the hand crank, a foot pedal? You know, what is your priority? And then make adjustments for being able to actually create an embroidery stitch with a machine. Because you're not just sewing. You don't, I mean, you can, but if you're trying to do like a long and short embroidery stitch, you're going to have to develop the skill of moving the hoop in conjunction with the power source.